Hi, Ruby.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? Welcome.
Hi. I really wanted to join in, but I'm getting ready for work, so I have my picture, so
Yeah,
I
no
don't.
worries. And also,
Okay, great.
we will be recording this, so
Oh,
we'll
okay.
post it on our YouTube channel if you need to watch it later.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks
Yeah,
so much for coming.
definitely.
All right. Well, it's 11, so I'm going to start. All right. I'm going to grab one more thing here before we do a screen share.
How many people are in the Zoom or in the meeting?
It's just you right now. Most people check into this. Most people check in to our YouTube channel and they just watch it in their own time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sometimes, like normally my cousin sisters are on the call this week, but they've all got family in and there's just a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
So we find that more people tune into the pre-recorded version as opposed to checking in with us in real time. So it just varies.
Oh,
It varies
okay.
from call to call.
Oh, okay.
But because you're getting ready and I won't be able to see you, if you have questions or if you need me to slow down about anything, just make sure you're unmuted and just speak up and let me know. Just interrupt me. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to be doing a screen share for all those tuning in after the fact and watching in. So I'm going to share with you some images so that everybody can see what all we're doing here. All right, so to start off, thank you so much for coming to our Samhain Sabbat celebration and Ancestral Healing session today. And we like to do these sessions in advance so that everyone has an opportunity to make preparations before the actual Sabbath. So I just want to share with you a few ways that you can stay connected with us. We're very easy to find at Urban Oracle. My name is Neen Puliano, and I'm the creatrix and owner of Urban Oracle. If you would like to stay connected with us, we're very easy to find on Facebook and on YouTube by just searching for Urban Oracle. Our Instagram is at Urban Oracle without the comma. Or the apostrophe, sorry. And then if you're interested in being a part of our private online community, it's kind of like a private Facebook community. We have our own community for that, that you can join, and it's over Mighty Networks. So you would need to, enter this URL into your browser to find us, but it's herb-n-oracle.mn.co/. And it'll ask you like what your interests are and why it's appealing for you to be a part of our community. And then we'll set up a quick interview call that you can schedule yourself through my scheduler for us to connect and chat in person so we can get to know each other better and make sure that this community is a great place for you and that you're going to be learning and connecting and being with the kind of people you want to be with, things like that. So it's just a chance for us to get to know each other a little bit better. So all of that aside, let's talk about Samhain. Samhain is one of my favorite Sabbats to celebrate. And I'm going to pull up two things here. I'm going to share this screen with you all. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so Samhain versus Halloween. Let's talk about that. So Samhain is known as the Witch's New Year. That's kind of the best way to remember it by, is it being the Witch's New Year. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So Samhain is known as the Witch's New Year, and it takes place from sunset of October 31st through sunset of November 1st. And Samhain means summer's end. So it's that period of the year where it's marking the end of summer and we're starting into that fall-winter cycle. Samhain and its traditions have undergone several transformations before the celebration of what we know of as Halloween came into being. So Christianity borrowed traditions from many different faiths, altering details here and there to Christianize seasonal celebrations, and Samhain was no different. So Christians adopted Samhain and changed it to celebrate saints instead of deceased relatives. And so they moved the date of Samhain to November 1st, and they also renamed it to All Saints Day. Now, the night before All Saints Day became known as All Hallows Eve, and the word hallows is essentially translating to saints, like hallowed ground, sacred people, saints, that kind of thing. So All Saints Day, the night before, was All Hallows Eve, and on All Hallows Eve, people would dress up as saints, and or if in the tradition of Samhain, if they were still not fully converted, they were still dressing up as deceased loved ones, and they would go knocking door to door asking for the things that they need as a way of nourishing the saints or the spirits on the other side of the veil. Now, over time, All Saints Day became known as All Souls Day, and it was moved again to November 2nd. And All Hallows Eve, over time, became known as Halloween, but it still remained on the same day of that evening of the 31st. So, Dia de los Muertos is a tradition in Mexico, and it's much like Samhain and Halloween, but it focuses solely on honoring deceased friends and family. And it does take place on November 1st, although in many places it extends into November 2nd as well. And they have more specific things around meeting places in cemeteries, using candles, decorated with sugar skulls, very specific types of food as offerings, things like that. So there are more culturally specific dynamics to Day of the Dead. And Day of the Dead is celebrated in many places, not just Mexico. But as far as Samhain and Halloween go, they share a lot of similarities over the years. It's just about bringing that intentionality back into why we celebrate the Samhain Sabbath, or why the Samhain Sabbath was celebrated, in order to reinvigorate and breathe new life into the Samhain tradition that has since become what most people know today as Halloween. So Samhain specifically is a Gaelic festival, and it was celebrated by Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man. Now, Samhain was considered the Celtic witches' New Year, which means that for the witches' calendar, like our calendar would begin, it would start with Samhain. Instead of January 1st, it starts on Samhain. It's the beginning of the witches' calendar year. It's also signaled as a time of both death and rebirth. And Samhain was something that was doubly symbolic because it coincided with the end of a bountiful harvest season and the beginning of a cold and dark winter season that would present, plenty of challenges. This is the cold snap of the year where back in the old days when conditions were a little rougher, it made more physical demands on villagers' survival during this time of year. So Samhain was a time that was most often associated with human death. And this is because that through those months that lie ahead, because people did pass during those months ahead, because depending on how bountiful their harvest was or their livestock, if they were able to have enough nourishment, warmth, and shelter to last them until the following spring. And because it marked one of two times of year where the veil between our world and everything else that exists is at its thinnest. In other words, this is when spirits can freely enter our world. And those times is on Samhain, that October 31st through November 1st. And the other cross-border time of the year is on Beltane, which takes place on May 1st. So if we're thinking about the sacred hoop year, as indigenous cultures celebrated the sacred hoop year, this time of year around Samhain, it marks the time of year where humans, we have this natural, as it is reflected in nature, we have this inward contraction that happens when fall hits. And it really begins around the autumn equinox, around the Sabbath of Mabon, that we begin our descent into ourselves. So this time of year, we're having this inward contraction where we're having more contemplation, introspection, and inner reflection. So if I were to equate the 4 main phases of the moon to a calendar year, I would say that starting with the autumn equinox until we get to December 21st on the Yule Sabbath, that whole time in between there is like the waning phase of the moon. It's that drawing inward and having that inward reflection. It's that time of year for expressing gratitude for all the life you have lived from January up until now, all the life you've lived, felt, breathed throughout the year thus far. It's a time to harvest any medicine that might be hidden and waiting for you to unearth in regards to any grief or loss, traumas or triggers that you have that have not been, or that have yet been tended to. And it is a wonderful time to begin dreaming of the seeds that will be planted by you spiritually, mentally, and or physically next spring. This is a time to act on our dreams. This is the season to allow ourselves that big dreaming. So in other seasons of the year, like summer and spring, where we have newness, we have blossoming, we have growth, we have celebration, full authentic expression, especially in summer, there's a lot of outward distraction, which makes it really difficult for us to enter into big dreaming, okay? Because we're so focused on all these activities and community and connections and all of that. So this is the season, because of all that inward quiet stillness that's continuing to descend, but also could be seen as building, that stillness is building. It's the time for us to really allow ourselves to dream big and allow those possibilities to churn and bubble and swim and stew in our heads and minds and in our hearts. And it's a great time to journal about those things, to make note of them, not act on them quite yet in this season. You can start working and fleshing those things out come spring. After the Yule Sabbath around Imbolc is a great time to start cultivating those things. But this is a good dreaming time. Now, Samhain is one of 4 what's known as cross-quarter festivals, or you can call them quarter festivals or quarter Sabbats of the year. And what that means is that they fall directly in between a solstice and an equinox. All of the cross-quarter festivals, they all land like smack dab in between either the winter-summer solstice or the fall-autumn equinox. They all land right in the middle. So we've got these quarter festivals, and Samhain is one of them. It also happens to be that all of the cross-quarter festivals are also the 4 fire festivals. So all the quarter festivals, they're also the fire festivals. So if you do know what the quarter festivals are, which would be Samhain, Imbolc, Lunasa, and Beltane. So those 4, they're also fire festivals. So that's another way to remember which, because oftentimes people are wondering, is this a fire festival? And just to know that it's the quarter festivals are the ones that are really associated with fire and bringing light into the light into your life, and recognizing the quality of life and how it corresponds with the harvest, with the season, with your own inner life and reflection, all that kind of thing. So Samhain, given that it's a fire festival, it's a time for communal bonfires. Traditionally, these communities would gather on hilltops and they'd light a grand bonfire. And they do this for protection and cleansing rituals, and it was for the betterment of the entire town. And something that I find very beautiful about this tradition is that at home, they would extinguish their hearth fire, they'd snuff out their fireplaces, and they'd all gather up at the hilltop and they'd have a grand feast. They would do cleansing rituals. They'd all celebrate together about the thinning of the veil, this beautiful season and time where they're expressing gratitude for their bountiful harvest and all the gifts that they received and participated in from January up until this point. Or if it's thinking of the Witch's New Year, it would have been from the previous November all the way up until this point. And when the merriment was done, they would harvest a small flame from the big communal fire, and they bring that flame back home with them to relight their home hearth. And this was a way of not only bringing the magic and power energy of that protection and cleansing property that they all harvested together into the home, but it was also bringing community and unity into their home, which is really beautiful when you think about it. Samhain also marked a time of year where people would dress in costumes. This tradition that we have of Halloween, the costume that does come from Samhain, but in a different context. So people would dress up in costumes at Samhain, but specifically they were dressing up as either their ancestors or they were dressing up as creatures or beings that are on the other side of the veil. And they would go knocking door to door, but they would be asking for things that their ancestors or these beings needed, or things that they needed in order for them to be at peace, for their ancestors to be at peace, or for the Fae to be at peace, that kind of thing. So it was a way of making sure that their ancestors' needs were being met, and that whether in life or in death, their wishes were being honored. Now, some even believed that with these costumes that they could be worn, or that they wore, they could wear them for protection, to disguise themselves from any unwanted and or evil spirits that might be searching for them. So that was one belief about how people participated and utilized this idea of dressing as another on this particular night when the veil was at its thinnest. We don't all have positive relationships with our ancestors, depending on people's lives and who their ancestors were, whatever. So for some, dressing as another, so maybe an ancestor couldn't find them, might be beneficial for that person. So it just kind of depended. Samhain also marked a time of year when one's divination skills would be most fluent. Due to that veil being at its thinnest, that cross-realm communication becomes so much easier. So that manifested itself in several ways. So people during traditional Samhain times, before All Saints Day, All Souls Day, All Hallows Eve, Halloween took place, in traditional times of Samhain, people were sure to frequent or to travel as far as they needed to sit with the town seer. Visiting with town seers, they didn't call them palmists back then, but town seers or the oracle of the town, that kind of thing, were the people that they were going to see. Also, folks who had this medicine already, divination, esoteric art skills passed down to them through their own heritage, they would be certain to divine meaning in all aspects of their day and night surrounding Samhain, that they were going to be looking for significant messages in everything about their day-to-day life, whether that was from animals and creatures that appeared to them throughout the day. It could be divining the land, messages received in the land itself with how things were positioned or interacting with one another, cloud divination, like all of the things. They were going to be very mindful throughout the sunset of the 31st through the sunset of the 1st to be on the lookout for all different kinds of signs. I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty positive that there were people who were not gifted in the esoteric arts of divination, where they were probably popping up and setting up booths because they knew full well that this was absolutely a profitable season where people were going to be seeking seers' help, that they would make claims that they were a seer and that they could help people through divine aspects, because it was a very profitable timing here for the local seers. So I'm sure that was taken advantage of by some at some point along the time frame when Samhain was at its height. Also, Samhain was a time for using, like, apples is a big seasonal food that is utilized during Samhain, and people would use apples in divination work, either through peeling or with apple bobbing. With the peeling, they would use, well, both peeling and the apple bobbing was to determine finding their true soulmate. If they, through peeling an apple, if they were able to make the peel consecutive all the way down the whole apple without the peel breaking, it meant that their true love, it was a sure thing that this was in fact going to be their person. And if the peel broke, it meant like, snooze you lose, they're not for you, move on. I actually don't know what the rules and logistics were of the apple bobbing. I don't know if people's names were carved into apples, and depending on which one you successfully picked, it was a, you know, that was your person, or if you knew ahead who your person was you were asking about, and it was whether or not you could successfully pick up an apple with your mouth. I have no idea. But apple bobbing for divination purposes was totally a solid thing. Jack-o'-lanterns are not just a Halloween thing, that comes from Samhain as well. People did carve jack-o'-lanterns. They carved pumpkins with scary faces, and they would place them at their threshold and within the windowsill facing outward to ward off evil spirits. That was very intentional. So it wasn't just to create spooky atmosphere like a lot of people observe it today. It was really for wards and protection. Excuse me. Now, it was also a time where pranks and tricks, that's where we get the whole trick or treat jingle, but pranks and tricks were also played out often during this season, and then later blamed on the fairies for, well, it must have been the fairies who, you know, crossed over in the veil during this time and they caused all this ruckus. So the fae were blamed. That's probably why the fae are so particular and finicky sometimes. Probably because we blame them for all of our mischievousness. Not cool. So yeah, pranks and tricks were very abundant during that time. Livestock was also, most of the sabbats have correlation to crops and to survival and livestock, and you know, whether it was all about survival. All the sabbats celebrating one's ability at sabbats, or a friend of mine, I think it was one of my coven sisters recently, who just was defined the sabbats as it was our ancestors' way of excuses to get together and drink. To drink and eat. And there's probably a whole lot of truth in that. Parties are fun. But the livestock, they would be brought down from the summer fields to be kept warm during this season. And it was also a slaughter season. So villagers and families would decide which animals would feed the family between now and spring, if not all of them. It just kind of depended on, you know, where their livestock was at. But it was definitely the slaughter season. And as many of you probably guessed, based on our agenda, it is definitely a season for feasting and celebration with and or to your ancestors. And we're going to talk a lot more about how to celebrate with your ancestors. And I'm also going to guide you through an ancestral dinner ritual that you can perform on Samhain. So let's talk about ways to celebrate Samhain. Scroll down here. I just realized that this little handout, I can't get the whole thing on the screen. And you get to see the whole picture. There we go. Okay. So ways to celebrate Samhain today. How do we celebrate it today? So what you can do is you want to utilize it to get in touch with ancestors because the veil's at its thinnest. But it's also a great day for grief tending. Samhain is a great season to really honor your shadow work and get in there. If you don't know how to honor your shadows, they're really deep, dark seated triggering things that kind of your most traumatic events in life. My recommendation to you is to get involved in group grief work, group grief tending and group shadow work, because having a village to support you while you're doing your descent, they're not there, the village isn't there to give you advice, they're there to hold space. Everyone is there to hold space for each other with accountability and to let everyone know that you're not alone. We're here for you, that whole support system. why most people don't grieve and work on their shadows in general is because they're afraid no one will be there to pull them back out of the water. So when it comes to your really hard traumas and triggers, communal grave tending, I swear by it. It's amazing. It's definitely the best way to do. If you'd like recommendations on that, please reach out to me at urbanoracle@gmail.com. It's just our business name with no apostrophe at gmail.com. Reach out to me and I can be of assistance in that way. But if we're talking about a little bit more on the surface things, limiting beliefs that you might have about yourself, then that type of grief tending, we can absolutely work on that, and you can work on that on your own. On our YouTube channel, we have a video called The Karma Cleanse, How to Cleanse Your Karma. That's free. Our YouTube channel is free, so you can go check that out, and you can walk your limiting beliefs through the Karma Cleanse. But this is a season. This is a great season to work on that grief, because any unprocessed grief you have is inherited. It gets passed down from offspring to offspring. So any grief your ancestors or parents didn't tend to in their waking years, you inherited it. So a lot of the weight you may or may not be feeling that you're carrying around on your shoulders isn't even yours. Okay, so tending to one's grief is super important. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But offering forgiveness, this is also a great season for that. Offering forgiveness, unburdening your heart from anything, any relationship, any bitterness, soreness that you have. Unburden your heart during this season and offer forgiveness, not just to others, but to yourself, especially to yourself. That's really important. Self-compassion, all the way. Offering food and drink to your ancestors, just like deities, and even plants. Like if you think about plants, plants are very specific about what kind of nutrients they need, how much sunlight, all the things that make a plant happy to thrive and grow. Just like that, deities have very specific desires about how they like to be honored, whether it's left with coconut shells or with pearls or with flowers, or they all have specific needs. And our ancestors are no different. So when it comes to offerings to our ancestors, we want to think about things that were relevant to them. You know, what was their favorite drink? Or did they smoke a loose leaf tobacco in their pipe? Like maybe leave a tobacco offering, like things like that. So some things to think about in ways of honoring your ancestors. Essentially, when it comes to food and drink for your ancestors, it's another way of honoring them is by giving them the nutrients that you need to survive through the winter. So it's this idea that giving creates more abundance in one's life, and celebrating the opposite of scarcity. So not being afraid to give what little you do have to give to your ancestors, knowing that it will be returned to you. And that's a really powerful practice to have in one's life, no matter what season it is, to practice giving, knowing that you're good. Like the universe will provide, your guides, your ancestors, so they will provide. Like it's all good. So ancestors are really seeking our hospitality during this time. So we want to make inviting effort to welcome them. So consider practicing the old ways of dressing up as one of your ancestors on the other side of the veil and knocking door to door and asking for what they need. And you can make an ancestral game out of this. For example, say you dressed up as one of your deceased relatives, and perhaps that deceased relative loves peanut butter cookies. And your partner, say they dressed up as an uncle who loved smoking from an old-fashioned pipe. So basically what the two of you do is you go door to door and you would kind of make a scavenger hunt out of it. So you're asking people if, you know, we're doing an ancestral scavenger hunt for Halloween or for the Sabbath season, whatever you're comfortable saying. We're looking for peanut butter cookies and loose leaf tobacco, like loose leaf tobacco donations. Do you have either of those? And the game could get more fun depending on how big of a group of people you're kind of door knocking with. But this is also a great season to go visit a cemetery if you don't celebrate Samhain with others, or maybe you have bad relations with ancestors and you don't want to have kind of that really interpersonal connection. You could go to a cemetery and just give offerings to all those who come before you in kind of a general overarching ritual or ceremony about gratitude, forgiveness, thankfulness, around like that their time here was not wasted, and that whether you know them or not, or whether you know what they did or what they didn't do, you know that they made a positive impact on somebody in their time spent here, and that you just want to give reverence and gratitude to all the spirits that come before and all that they've done to contribute to make your life possible and all that kind of thing. You never know. But it's a great way, it's a nice gesture. If you are looking for things to do and you're not really sure how to participate, you can always give gratitude to those you've never met. It's a nice way to celebrate. Welcome. Okay, so you can also, because the veil's at its thinnest, this is a great time to host a seance. If you know any mediums around, this is a good time for that. It's also not a bad time to try divining yourself or try mediumship yourself, provided that you have good, strong protection and clearing rituals and shielding practices that you have in your toolkit. If you got all of those things, you might find that you do have some latent abilities for mediumship, and this would be a good time for you to tap into what that actually feels like. But really, the protection and clearing and shielding is very important. Exercise caution, or just work with someone who's already a medium. But seances work great during this time. Also, it's a good time for divining, doing love divination, either with tarot or with runes, or scrying, especially by fire, either through a candle flame or by staring into a bonfire and divining results that way. Calling upon the divine in any way during this season is very effective, and doing things in groups. This is not, despite the inward contraction of this season, Samhain itself, again, all the Sabbats, they're celebration. So it's important to find an opportunity to do things with a group. If you're normally a solo practitioner or you like doing things alone a lot, this is a great time to just break out of your comfort zone a little bit and, you know, give yourself the challenge of, I'm going to get together with a couple other people on this day, and just try to make that a goal for yourself. Is it required? Of course not. It's your practice. You do whatever you want and what you feel comfortable with. But doing things in a group, it's a nice way to stretch your comfort zone and to enjoy the company of others. Other people, surrounding ourselves with other people helps us grow. So it's not a bad move. Ways you can decorate your altar for Samhain. Again, personal preference. Do what you want. But some popular things to put on one's altar during Samhain is the colors gold, utilizing gold. Skeletons, obviously, because we're working with loved ones who passed on, friends and family. It was very common in Samhain for people to use grave rubbing. They'd take like the trace paper and they place it against the headstone and do a rubbing to get a transfer of that headstone to place on their altar. Some people have they keep a collection. I have a box that has little vials in it, and it's to hold grave soil. So grave site soil for different ancestors. That's something to have on your altar. Pumpkins, squash, root vegetables, nuts and seasonal berries, and dark breads like dark rye or pumpernickel are really popular. And then most people have a separate altar for their ancestors. It's the ancestral altar, which can have pictures, heirlooms, candles, offerings, things of that nature. Now, mealtime, this is eating seasonal fruits and vegetables and wild game, like, again, the slaughter season. Eating your own wild game is a very potent and powerful practice to have for your Sabbath celebration. Preparing dark bread, apple cider, wine, and being sure to set a place setting at your table for your ancestors. Not a place setting per ancestor, but that all of your ancestors are being honored by this single place setting at the table. And to consider that during Samhain, the table becomes a sanctified place. It becomes a sacred space, so we don't want to leave toys or pens or files or our computer or laptop. We don't want to leave our coffee cups. We don't want to leave anything on the dining table during the season of Samhain. Think about it as a sanctified place to keep us mindful that this is a time when our ancestors are seeking our attention and they want to convene with us. They want to celebrate with us and connect, or to heal and grow together with you. They care about you and they want to be a part of your life during this time, because this is when it's easiest for them to make that connection. So having your dining table cleared and uncluttered helps us stay mindful during this time of season. So something to consider. Herbs that are very potent and powerful during this time that can be utilized in either as offerings or in your cooking or in simmer pots would be allspice, mugwort, broom, mullein, oak leaves, acorns, rosemary, sage, pine cones, and straw. Now, because divination is very effective during this time of year, that brings us to our divination psychic cards, which we're going to talk about. So how to DIY your own psychic divination cards. So this image is a picture of what's known as Zener cards. I first saw these in the original Ghostbusters movie. It was right at the beginning of the film, and Bill Murray was running this little psychic experiment, and he was totally doing it just to hit on chicks. But it was so funny to discover years later from that 80s movie that these Zener cards are a real thing. So how you can use these, so basically what these divination cards do, or how you use them, is that one side of the card, is, well, this is a horrible example, but it's like a poker card. It has the exact same image on it on all the cards, or it's just flat out blank. If it's white, even better, just plain old white. And then the other side has, an image on it. So basically in the game, you're either looking at a blank surface of a card and you're trying to intuit or use your psychic gift to determine what's on the other side of the card. So in Zener cards, they use shapes. There's a star, a square, wavy lines, a plus sign, and a circle. Now, to make your own, there's an unlimited potential of things that you can do with these. So I do recommend going to a craft store and just getting blank white cardstock, or if you've got a paper cutter, whatever. But you want to make sure our eyes pick up way more information than we think. So if we start putting images on the backs of cards, like I want to paint all the backs of my cards purple or whatever, our eyes are going to be catching on associating what's on one side of the card to these little tiny imperfections that can be found, whether it's the way it's cut or whether how it's colored, things like that. So because of that, I recommend buying cards. They're pre-cut and they're exact because they came out of a machine, and that they're totally plain on the back side. That just makes it easier for you not to kind of find ways to cut corners with this game and your biases to interfere with your ability to cultivate these gifts. So, and then on the other side, you can make them as elaborate as you want. If you want to actually paint beautiful pictures on them, or if you want to do something simple like the Zener cards by creating a symbol. One idea that one of my Coven sisters had with her kids to create Zener cards for her kiddos was to use stickers. So if you think about say you have one card that has 3 green frogs. They're all green, they're all frogs, it's the exact same sticker, and there's 3 of them on the card. And one is like 8 pink bunnies, you know. The benefit of doing something like that is that some people's intuitive gifts are drawn to color only, where they're picking up on color and the meaning behind the color is what their gifts are drawn to. It could also mean that some people's intuitive gifts are based around emotion. So if there isn't a person on the card, it might be hard for them to intuit what it is, or maybe the image itself reminds them of an emotional experience, so they might be able to connect with that card and what's on it. So I feel like I feel like using people or creatures is helpful, and also color specific on the card. So if they can't intuit the person on the card, they might be able to pick on the color of the card. They might be able to pick up a number of the card. Maybe numerology is in one of their gifts, but they might sense a number on the side of the card. So things to consider about what you can add to that card to help people read into, especially if you don't know what your psychic gifts are. It's good to give yourself kind of some options. So the sticker idea has a lot of potential in it. It offers an image, a color, a quantity, all in one go. So that's kind of cool. For each card, and every card will be different. You can have repetitions of certain cards. Now, ways that you can make this into a game is that you basically have people sitting around the table or sitting in a circle, and you've got your pile of cards. They're all face down, and one person will start, and they can draw a card and set it to the side. They're not allowed to look at, flip it over and look at it. No one gets to do that, but it's face down. And they get to decide. Now, some people are clairsentient, which means their psychic gifts are going to be in their gut and in their fingers at times. So touch is allowed. For some people, they need to touch an object, hold an object in order to sense into it. A lot of clairvoyants, touching things to the third eye helps them intuit a message, which means everyone else would be able to see the card, but they can't. And they might be able to sense it that way. So touching the card is totally fine, but we're not going to flip the card over. Okay, so they'll draw a card, not looking at it, and then they'll use whatever they have in their toolkit to try to sense into what's on the other side of the card. If they get it right, once when they flip it over, whether they got the color right or the quantity right or the image right or the whole thing, whatever, if they got it right, they keep the card. And then it's the next person's turn, and they'll draw a card, they'll try to intuit and flip it over. So at the end of the game, whoever has the most cards wins, and you can create a cute little prize for whoever wins the game. So divination cards are a fun way to practice and stretch your intuitive gifts. You can also use them in different ways. Like you can go, if you're working on them by yourself, you can use the deck. If you want to work on clairsentience, you can do it by touching. Get it off the pile. So you're not trying to feel, it's not being muddled by all the energy of all the other cards. Move it off the pile and use touch and your gut, your intuition and your gut to try to sense what's in each card going through the pile. You can also use clairvoyance where you're trying to visualize what's on the other side, not through touch, but just using visualization. Okay. Clairaudience, you're working on, are you hearing different qualities that are creating certain visualizations for you, like sending you messages through an auditory kind of experience that's bringing about visions. It's not technically heard through your ears, but like telekinesis, you would, lay the cards out and you're trying to draw a card to you is a way to practice on that gift. So there's a lot of different things you can do and how you utilize these cards and these decks. But it can be a lot of fun for you to do, and especially if you're working on it with a group. Okay, so now we're going to share about ancestral healing and ways you can honor your ancestors during this time. So I'm going to be sharing about 5 ways that you can honor your ancestors during the season of Samhain. And also, don't get discouraged if for some reason life circumstances make it impossible for you to celebrate your ancestors on this particular Sabbath season. It's not the only time of the year that you can connect with your ancestors. If you can't do this on Samhain, you can't do it on Beltane, it doesn't mean, oh, boom, I missed my window and I have to wait a whole year before I can connect with them. It's not true. You can connect with your ancestors every day if you want. This mark of the season just makes it easier to do that. That's all. So don't get discouraged. These things you can do at any time, any day of any year, whenever you can, whenever you want. Okay, so for the number one way, not the number one way, but one way you can work with your ancestors. Oh, and I do want to preface this with, before we talk about these 5 things, I do want to recommend, especially to, this is something I tell all of any baby witches who are working with me, who are new to their witchcraft path, and they're not really very solidified yet in their own witch identity. And obviously not everyone who celebrates Samhain calls themselves a witch either. That's totally cool too. But one of the things I would recommend to anyone who is kind of within the realm of druidry or witchcraft, Wicca paganism, neo-paganism, that whole spectrum, is I would recommend that you go out and investigate and do some research on what types of magic or traditions were practiced by your ancestors. What were they partaking in? What part of the world were they in? And during that time, what types of traditions and magic were they into and practicing? Because that can give you some information about where some innate gifts might be kind of hidden within you that were passed down through your bloodline. So you might be able to tap into an ancient wisdom, some old remembering that are kind of locked within your own DNA. So that can give you some insight into some of those things. So that's an interesting thing, or that's a good rabbit hole to go down to investigate. It's not going to make up the sum total of all your innate gifts, but there might be some things in there that you didn't know about, that once when you read about it, something in you kind of clicks and unlocks for you. So I do recommend investigating into your own heritage. For me, my ancestors predominantly come from Italy and Scotland. So we've got the Stregheria witchcraft tradition. And then, we've got Scottish witchcraft, Highland seers, that Celtic folkloric magic, all of those things within Scotland. I do have Bavarian blood and French blood and things like that as well that I can dig deeper and investigate further. But predominantly I'm, focusing on my Italian heritage and my Scottish heritage. So what are yours? Something to think about. Also, don't shy away from ancestry work, or don't feel like you have to shy away from ancestry work if you don't have a good connection with your ancestors, or if like your immediate relatives that have passed, if you had terrible relationships with them, or you didn't respect them, or you didn't like them, and you're like, I don't want to work with these people, I don't want to see them again. Good news, you can set intentions. You always have the ability to set intentions to declare to the beautiful many, the powers that be, the universe, God, your gods or goddesses, whoever you work with, you have the freedom and the ability to announce your intentions of who you actually want to invite in to your time and space to share sacred space with. You get to decide that. So you can create parameters of like, I only wish to call upon ancestors I have yet to meet, who have lovingly been guiding me along my path. I'd like them to make themselves known to me so I can learn more about them. Things like that. You get the power to decide, and you have the say around that. So that's something to consider if, not all of us are very keen on the idea of reconnecting with those in our lives who didn't treat us well, were not respectful or nice, were loving or caring, or maybe they were kind of violent and really not cool. All of those kinds of things. There's a way where you can still have connections with ancestors without inviting people who make you feel unsafe into your life. You don't have to do that ever. Okay. All right. So number 1. So one of the ways that you can honor your ancestors which I think is really cool, is by fulfilling your own personal potential. In other words, seeking and finding what your soul's purpose is. If you're really off track around discovering what your unique soul purpose is, your ancestors are more likely than not trying to nudge you towards that intended path. You just need to learn how to pick up on those signs. So it can be very difficult to actualize your soul's purpose if your relationships with your ancestors are unresolved and or if they're messy. And this is true for all the relationships in your waking life too. If your relationships in your life are super unresolved and messy, it can make it difficult for you to step into your own authenticity because you have a lot of roadblocks and barriers in your way that are impeding your focus, your attention, and your energy, all the things. So spending time during Samhain, offering offering forgiveness to your ancestors and asking for their forgiveness as well is a great thing that you can do to create some healing and balance within those relationship dynamics. This also applies to tending to your grief. Like I mentioned, untended grief is inherited. So a lot of the weight we carry ourselves is not necessarily ours. So tending to that grief is really important. You don't want to pass your grief down to your kids and make it their responsibility to heal your mess. That's not cool. So tend to your own grief. Learning to express your emotions in healthy ways can help you discover your soul's purpose. This means committing to tell the truth in relationships. Practice reaching out for necessary support when and as you need it. Don't be embarrassed. Or vulnerability is a strength. It's not a weakness. So reaching out when you need help, do that. Seek education to better yourself. Take better care of your body. Accept greater responsibility for becoming a loving and more reliable human being. All of those things are super positive and can help you not only pick up on these nudges, universal nudges and signs that are trying to help guide you lovingly towards your soul purpose, but it can also help you to see and discover it, not just the nudges, but the purpose itself. Now, anything that helps you become more ethical, balanced, open-hearted, is to become a more open-hearted person is one of the most powerful and sincere offerings you can make to an ancestor. For them to see you living your best life, for them to see you really stepping into your own authenticity, it's inspiring, whether you're living or deceased. Like, it's a very inspiring thing to witness. So that in itself is a very profound offering. Now, often things that drag us down that we've inherited from our ancestors, like patterns of sexual abuse, addictions, wounds related to money and poverty, even mental illness, things like that. If we understand ancestral inheritance enough, often within the problem lies the solution itself. So for example, let's say we have a fear of scarcity. Now, having a fear of scarcity might not just be we have a fear of scarcity. It could be something we inherited. And it's not that we inherited it from other people in our ancestral line who have a fear of scarcity. It's more likely that why we have this fear of scarcity comes from unhealed grief, wounds, and trauma from our ancestral line that was strong providers. So when we have very financially abundant, strong providers in our ancestral line, but they did not tend to their own baggage, grief, wounds, and loss, how that can contort and manifest itself in their offspring further down the bloodline can result in kind of an opposite effect, where now we have this fear of scarcity. So offering forgiveness to heal the wound of the ancestors who didn't tend to their things, who were strong providers, can heal your own fear of scarcity, where you feel less of that and you feel more assuredness in the abundance and your ability to access anything within the infinite to support you and provide for you and have your needs being met. Addiction can be a way of numbing the sensitivity that's required for those to be successful healers, artists, and lovers. So if you come from healers, artists, and lovers who did not work on their own baggage, work on their own shit, to their own shit, that could have manifested itself in you as having addiction issues. Okay, physical violence can be a distortion of a gift from ancestors that were healthy warriors. Okay, so things to consider about limitations that you feel you have. Are they limiting beliefs or are they ancestrally related? And human dowsing is one way that you can really tap into, is this my stuff or is it ancestral stuff? It needs to be cleansed and cleared. Okay, so number 2, dedicating positive actions in the name of your ancestors. So what does that mean? So if you have the sense that your grandmother's spirit, let's say, is not at peace, and or if she's well and you just want to celebrate her life and spirit, you can consider dedicating a positive action to her rather than all your ancestors in general. You can just focus in on your grandma. So the more focused the dedication, the greater and more concentrated the effects are. So you can pick a dedication that's relevant to the one you're dedicating it to. For example, if your father, let's say, who passed, was a racist or was engaged in domestic violence, you might want to consider donating to a charitable organization in their name for racial healing or a battered women's shelter, things like that. That is a way of healing ancestral trauma. And it's also a great opportunity to offer forgiveness and to ask for forgiveness and to, it's a great way to heal. So likewise, if the deceased or the loved one loves, say, local wildflowers, you could dedicate a day of service to a native plant society. That can enhance the intimacy, emotional charge, and effectiveness of your offering to your ancestors. And simple dedications are equally as effective. So let's say you go to a yoga class and you can just simply state your intention to yourself in the beginning of your practice, like I dedicate the positive energy from my yoga today for the well-being of my grandfather. May his spirit be at peace and unified with our loving ancestors. And then periodically throughout your yoga session, you can just re-tap into that intention to say, like, this is for you, Graham, and carry on. It can be as simple as that. That is a wonderful way of giving offering to ancestors and to provide healing for ancestors. Number 3, to stay open to direct communication from your ancestors. This is very likely during Samhain. It's a very potent time, and on Beltane. So this can happen spontaneously in forms such as dream contact, waking encounters, synchronicity, and or through performing rituals. And I'm going to talk about each of those. So when working with direct communication, this is like actual dialogue happening between you and a deceased loved one or friend, it's really important to get a second opinion. Okay, meaning ask for guides and or your highest self, your sacred seed wisdom, your infinite pool of intuition, if you are conversing with who they say they are. There's a lot of trickster spirits out there, and they are so gifted at pulling the wool over your eyes and fooling you into believing and or doing XYZ. So it's a really good idea to get a second opinion from a quality of being and an entity you do trust that is very reliable, that they're able to tap in and confirm, like, yeah, that's your Graham, or no. So some red flags around that. Good indicators that you're not actually conversing with who you think you are is that you can get an unsettling feeling in your stomach. You could potentially feel a color within your body that you associate that color with negativity. So maybe a color that you associate with negativity is the color black or gray, and you feel grayness like somewhere in your body. Like that could be be an indicator. If the spirit is asking you to do something, especially if they're using words like, all you have to do is ... or you should ... or you need ... trickster spirits and darker entities are going to make demands and requests of you and try to ask you or convince you to do things. Light beings and ancestors don't do this. Okay, so that's something to consider. When in doubt, pause your communication, check in with your guides, and make sure that who you're speaking with is who they say they are. Now, because if you are working with a trickster spirit, the last thing you want to do is bait them the information you're actually trying to discover. So you don't want to say, are you my grandma Rose? Because if they're a trickster spirit, what are they going to say? They're going to say, yes, I am. Okay? And you're like, oh, trust earned, and you just continue. So instead, you want to say, who am I talking with? Let them answer, because they won't know how to respond to that unless they are who they say they are. So little things to keep in mind about that, okay? If you know protection and clearing, it's also a good idea if you do identify you are conversing with a trickster spirit to do clearing to usher them into the level of light and resume trying to make that connection with that particular loved one or allowing that loved one to come in. If you don't have ways of doing that, please reach out to me. That is something that I mentor people through and would be happy to work with you. Okay, now not all dreams involving your ancestors are known as direct contact. So, however, if a dream feels like a direct visitation, especially if you realize you're in dream state and you're being visited by a relative, then it probably is direct contact because you're woke at that point. So take advantage of that time. That's a really beautiful opportunity for you to have healing or closure or just pure spending time with someone you love. So really take advantage of that. Ask how you can be of service to them. Ask if there's anything they need. Connect with them in all the ways you wish you could if they were still here. Here. Okay. Now, synchronicity. What the hell is that? Synchronicity speaks to two or more events that are meaningfully related, but would otherwise be unlikely to occur together. For example, let's say it's the anniversary of your grandmother's passing, and her favorite flower was irises. Okay, so let's say you're going about your day, and it just occurs to you that it's your grandmother's anniversary of the day she died, and you're like, oh. And then, out of nowhere, your neighbor comes over carrying a bouquet of irises, and they say, we just got these in, and my wife's allergic. Do you want these? Okay, that is an example of synchronicity, and what that means is your grandmother is letting you know that she's here, and she's thinking of you, or she's trying to connect with you, or she's showing up in your life, saying, I'm thinking of you too. Okay. So synchronicity is a really beautiful thing that happens. Again, ancestors nudging us all the time. Ancestors, the universe, totems. There's an unlimited number of things that are really trying to help us out all the time. We just need to be aware of how to recognize those signs and know we're not alone. We're lovingly being guided like the whole way. Okay, let's go to number 4. All right, number 4. Establish a sanctified place for your ancestors. All right, you should know, I should disclose this up front, that the words altar and shrine, for me personally, I use them interchangeably. And it's because my shrines are also altars and vice versa. So just know if you're particular about the distinction between the two, I blend them every time. So altars technically are surfaces for offerings, and shrines are a place of worship. For me, I believe that worshiping is an offering and vice versa. Like if you're giving an offering, there's value and reverence and worship to whatever the offering is and who you're giving it to. So I feel, to me, they just blend right together beautifully. So it's okay if you disagree, but I just want to disclose it up front so I don't confuse you. I mishmash those words on purpose. Okay. All right. So if you don't have an altar already designated to your ancestors, some people believe that then you become the ancestral altar. And maybe that sounds cool, but it's not really that cool. So when you become the ancestral altar, it can make healing those ancestral untended griefs and traumas that were not processed by your forebears. It can make the healing of those incidences very difficult. So it's good to have that separation. So you can heal, this is separate from you, things like that. Now, when you have a sanctified external place for them, you've created a site where an ongoing relationship dynamic can thrive and grow and or be healed and then dismantled and taken down. It doesn't have to like stay up forever if that's not your jam. You can just create it outside of yourself, do your healing, and then lovingly like take it down and it's done, if that's your thing. Now, an altar doesn't have to be on display in your house, like an all year round thing. Some people have altars where they assemble it each day or once a year or something like that. They spend time with it and then they take it down and they put it away. That's another way that you can do it. You also want to consider creating your ancestral altar by having your ancestors naturally guide you to where you should build it based on where their energy is most concentrated. For example, if you wanted to have an altar or a sanctified place to honor your grandmother, and your favorite thing about her was that she was a total sorceress in the kitchen, like a total closeted kitchen witch. She was really gifted at making food that really transformed people's lives. So you might want to consider having a little altar, sanctified, designated place of reverence for her within a kitchen cupboard. You open that puppy up to grab a cookbook or a spice, and you've got this little altar reminder of like, oh, Mama, my grams or whatever. It's, that's a place where you can tuck that altar away. Okay, another example of a sanctified place for your ancestors might not be in your home at all. It might be a tree in a neighborhood where you all used to live, or a river you used to spend your summers water skiing on with the family. Things like that. A place where you go to visit could become your ancestral altar. Your ancestral altar, if it is in your home, it can contain photos, earth from grave sites, those tombstone rubbings, their bones or ashes, pouring a shot of their favorite liquor, like especially in the curandera traditions, like it's very common, and not just in the curandera, but there is lots of traditions where they'll leave like a little baby shot glass on an altar, and they'll fill it with the ancestor's favorite alcohol of choice, and they'll take one too. So they'll fill themselves a shot, they'll clink, and say like happy selling, love you, and they'll take a shot. So that's a way of connecting as well. Heirlooms of theirs, jewelry they wore, a tablecloth they hand stitched themselves, something like that, can all be a part of this altar. Every tradition has very different beliefs around this, so do what's true to you or is in accordance with your ancestral traditions, but do what feels best and what inspires you to actually connect with that altar. If you're not inspired to connect with the altar, you're not going to do it, and that's kind of becomes pointless at that point. So it's about doing what makes you feel safe, comfortable, and best. Okay. And number 5, making offerings to your ancestors. So like I said before, ancestors have very specific things that they like to receive. So Samhain is a perfect time to ask them, how do you want me to connect with you? What kind of offerings do you like to receive? What kind of meal do you want me to prepare for you at our ancestral dinner tomorrow night or next year? Like, what kind of meal makes you all excited? to come gather around the table and for us to share time together, that kind of thing. You can ask them, what do you like best, you know? Also, you can ask them, how do I know when you're connecting with me? You can ask them for a confirmation. Like when my, Grandpa Frenchie's going to connect with me, he's going to flick on one of my lights in my house that's turned off. If I see the light flick on, I know that's my grandpa. That kind of a thing. You can get clarification around that as well. Now, offerings can be made in a limited number of ways. So placing food that always reminds you of them on the altar. Food is a very common offering. Again, releasing scarcity, stepping into that place of abundance, giving what we do have up as an offering, knowing it'll be returned to us eventually. Like, it's all good. Sharing stories and memories of them is a beautiful way to give offering. Pouring a shot of their favorite drink, taking a shot with them, that kind of thing. Lighting a candle on their altar is a way of saying hello and giving reverence and letting them know you're thinking of them. Performing a daily ritual of assembling an altar and then taking it down each night. That's in a very mindful way. That's a beautiful way of giving reverence. Playing their favorite board game on your ancestor's birthday each year. Their favorite board game on their birthday. That's something you could do, baking their favorite dish or cooking a meal on their birthday with them in mind. So many different things. And also, gratitude and forgiveness are equally acceptable offerings. If you're like, oh, I don't have any food to give, or I don't have any money to give, or I don't have my time or energy, like if you have a lot of diminished capacities at that point in time, gratitude is a beautiful offering, and so is forgiveness. They're equally as potent and powerful as giving physical things. Okay, so don't feel bad if all you feel you have to offer is gratitude. That's a beautiful gift. It's a totally valid way to honor one's ancestors. Now, if you have an ancestral altar and you decide eventually to stop working with it and to dismantle it, it's best to do that only after you've informed your ancestors why you're taking it down and have received their cooperation to convene in a different way. Because that can be a really alarming thing for ancestors, that they show up to work with you and the place that they come to show up has been like obliterated. It no longer exists. And they don't know why. That's if you can, hopefully you can imagine how jarring that would be if you were on the receiving end of that. So don't do that. Let them know, be transparent, have a conversation about it, and then you can move on from being like, I need to figure something else out. What's a different way we can connect? Maybe it needs to be outside. I feel more connected to you if we convened outside. Things like that. Have a conversation about it before you go there. Cool. All right. So let's talk about this ancestral dinner ritual. So let me pull up. Okay. So for a Samhain ancestral dinner, this is one of those things where I was looking online for a way to celebrate with my ancestors on Samhain myself, and found like this great ritual. And then like a year later, I decided to teach something to share, like today, teach with all y'all about Samhain. And now I don't know where I got this from. So this is not my ritual, and I sadly don't know who created it, so I'm not able to give proper credit, which is so bad. I'm so sorry, but this is not mine. So yeah, I just want to keep that in mind. So I actually do want to share this page with y'all. Okay, let me new share. Let's do this one. Okay. All right. So an ancestral dinner. So number one, you want to build an ancestral altar in the same room as your dining table. For me, I have like one of those little island bar kind of kitchen things with bar stools. So, and it was just me. So I have 2 stools. So I set one place setting for my ancestors and me for the other one. So I put my altar on the actual table itself. You don't have to do that as long as it's in the room, same room as your dining table. That's really what matters. Other than that, place it wherever you want. But you want to build an ancestral altar, ornate it with ancestral objects, photos of their favorite things, or draw something of their favorite things or whatever. Surround the altar with candles. Your altar can also include pets who have passed on. Pets are family members, totally, in my opinion. You want to set the dining table with one extra seat for all of your ancestors to dine at. So one place setting for all of the deceased loved ones. The eldest in your dinner ritual, they're going to plate the ancestors' plate first. So have them plate the ancestral plate first, and then everyone else will get plated the same dish as what the ancestors are receiving. The eldest in the group would then invite the ancestors with the following incantation. Now, this is what the person who created this was what they offered. It's important that you make it your own. Okay. This language I thought was great and resonated for me, but I've since made modifications to it for myself, and you should too. Like, don't feel afraid to modify things. It's about your relationship with your ancestors. So be true and authentic and speak into them. Okay, but here's an example. On this night of Samhain, when the veil is at its thinnest, we call out to those who came before us. We call to those who are available and wishing to connect. Tonight, we honor our ancestors. Spirits of our ancestors, we call to you, and we welcome you this night. We know you watch over us always, protecting and guiding us, and tonight we thank you. We invite you to join us and share with us this meal. The next thing you do is you would enjoy the feast, and you would all those who are participating in this ritual, you'd all swap stories about your ancestors. Participate in stories. Now, for me, all the ancestors I invited last year, all of them showed up. So I was swapping stories and reminiscing with them directly. So, but if it's less of a direct connection for you with ancestors, it's about connecting with your family members who are sitting at the table with you, and you're swapping stories about the ancestors you invited. Okay. So swapping stories. After the meal's finished, you'd clear all the plates except for the ancestral plate. You leave it there, and then the eldest would fill the cup with some wine or cider, and one of your or with one of your ancestors' favorite drinks. So you can decide that. The eldest would then recite their genealogy as best as they can remember. So, for example, I'm Sophia, daughter of Janet and Malcolm Tucci, niece of Margaret and Tony, granddaughter to Gabriella and Giuseppe Tucci, etc., etc. And then they take a sip of the cup and they pass it down until everyone has had a sip and recited their genealogy. Now, if you've got little kiddos, that whole genealogy thing can be really difficult and challenging for them. So just have them state, like, I'm so-and-so and I'm the son of, and they can just name their parents, or if they also know their grandparents, cool, but they don't need to do, that can be overwhelming for kids. The cup should end at the placement of the ancestral plate, where you will then leave it there. And then the youngest person gets to close the meal by saying something to the effect of, this is the cup of remembrance. We remember all of you. Though you have passed on, you are never forgotten, and we celebrate you as you live on within us. And then you all can bring your dinner to a close in any way that feels natural for you. All right. If you would like any of the handouts we had for today, or you'd like a copy of that Samhain dinner ritual, you can email us at urbanoracle@gmail.com. That's HERBNORACLE@gmail.com. And in the subject line, just write request for Samhain handout. and I can email that to you so you have a physical copy. And that is our Sabbath share for Samhain. If you have any questions for me, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions or anything like that. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. And just hope I find a link. I'm kind of scared about like, oh, what happens if I, we disconnect and then how am I going to find the link?
Yeah. So Urban Oracle, let me here.
I don't have a pen with me right now.
That's okay. Urban Oracle at gmail.com. Okay, so I just sent you our email and the name of how to search for us in the chat. If you can do a screenshot of the chat.
Yes.
Then you can have
awesome.
Yeah, Facebook, YouTube, even Google searching us at herb_N and then Oracle, you'll find us. We're the only urban oracle out there. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure hearing you and about very important subjects. And I will look into it a little bit more. I know there were some parts that I was like in and out, but I did hear it. I heard it through the whole thing. A little bit about the dinner. That's where I did not, I didn't get to hear it completely.
Yeah,
but other than that, it was basic. Mostly it was at the end of it, but yeah, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for your knowledge and sharing it with us.
Absolutely. And just feel free to email me and I can send you the dinner ritual. It's on a printout. It's all laid out. So feel free to email me and I can shoot that on over to you so you have a copy.
Yes. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it.
Have a beautiful Samhain and I hope you have a great day.
Same to you. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too. Goodbye.
All right, so to the rest of you, please feel free to reach out to us at urbanoracle.com. We offer spiritual gifts that are made from natural elements of the earth. And more so than that, we have one-on-one mentorship and training programs that last for several months. Some are 3 months, some are 6 months. I'm working on a year-long program right now to launch soon. And almost everything at Urban Oracle is customizable. So please feel free to connect with us, reach out to us, and we can make that connection happen. I never teach people how to have my personal practice. I feel like that's a huge disservice to your authenticity, and I'm not about that. My role as a priestess is here to help you identify what your particular spiritual path is and looks like. You already know what your path is, but you want to know how to deepen your path and practice. That's another service and how I make myself available to others as well. And also, I don't only work with witches. I work with Taoists and Buddhists and those who study Hinduism and shamanism. I have a very eclectic background, so I work with a lot of different traditions. So please feel free to connect with me if anything about today or about myself resonates with you and you are looking for a mentor to go deeper into your practice. I'm not an appropriate mentor for people who approach their spirituality as a hobby. I'm not an appropriate mentor for that. I really challenge my students and hold them accountable, and I really help them to create a very strong foundation and lifestyle to bring more harmony and connection into their life, not only within themselves, but with others, with nature, the elements, and all creatures in existence. So it's just to be clear, okay, so if you are looking to discover your practice, to go deeper in your practice, I would be happy to assist you. So let's connect and reach out to us at urbanoracle.com or urbanoracle@gmail.com or search for us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Urban Oracle. Again, my name is Nina Giuliano, and thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a blessed